The wrong house, a gateway to absolute suffering. The road was endless, swallowed by darkness. Daniel, Emily, and Chris had been driving for hours, but there was no sign of civilization. Then they saw it. A house. It loomed like a corpse, its structure unnatural, as if it had been built from rotting flesh instead of wood. Its windows were not windows, just black voids, yawning like empty eye sockets. And the door? It was already open, waiting. Chris exhaled. Looks abandoned. Maybe we can find a phone. Emily shivered. No, something's wrong. The air was thick, rotten. The trees surrounding the house were dead, their twisted branches curled inward, like fingers shielding a secret. Daniel stepped forward, and the house sighed. The second they crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut. But that wasn't the worst part. The walls were breathing. Their surfaces pulsed, veins bulging beneath the wallpaper. The air was humid, thick, wet, like the inside of a mouth. Chris touched the wall, and it twitched. Then, a bulging eye opened from the wallpaper. It rolled wildly, then snapped toward him. Chris stumbled back, gagging. Jesus! A hand burst from the floor, fingers gnarled, bones exposed. A mouth formed in the wall, stretched too wide, its teeth sharpened to jagged points. Help us! The voice was a chorus, hundreds of voices, sobbing, shrieking, choking on their own screams. Then something crawled out of the shadows. A man stood before them, or at least what used to be a man. His body was wrong, his arms and legs elongated, his joints stitched together with black thread. His skin was flayed in places, revealing pulsing, raw muscle. But the worst part? His face was stitched onto the back of his head, and it was smiling. "You've come home," he whispered, but his lips didn't move. Chris screamed. The man twitched violently, his bones snapping backward, his limbs folding and unfolding like a grotesque puppet. And then, he moved. Not ran. Glided. His bones cracked with each movement, his body snapping unnaturally. Chris tried to run, but the walls melted, forming grasping hands, pulling him down. "Get him out," Emily sobbed. But it was too late. The hands pulled Chris into the wall, his body melting into the flesh, his mouth twisting into a scream that didn't stop. His face, his wide, horrified eyes, merged with the wall. And then, he blinked. Chris was part of the house now. Daniel and Emily ran blindly, bursting through a door, into hell itself. The room was a womb. The walls pulsated, dripping with thick, black fluid. Bones jutted from the floor, forming a sickening altar. And in the center, a woman. She was suspended in the air, her abdomen grotesquely swollen, stretched to the point of tearing. Her skin bulged and twisted, something moving inside her. Her mouth was sewn shut, but her eyes were screaming. Then her stomach split open, and something crawled out, a creature. A writhing, shrieking mass of flesh, eyes, and jagged limbs. It twitched violently, its clawed fingers reaching blindly before snapping its head toward them. Emily vomited. Daniel grabbed her hand. "Run!" But the door was gone. A chilling whisper filled the air. "You were born for this." They turned, and Emily wasn't Emily anymore. Her skin peeled back, revealing nothing but a screaming void beneath. Her eyes melted, her mouth splitting open too wide. She twisted violently, her spine snapping backward. And then, she laughed. Daniel screamed. No escape. The house devoured him. His body melted into the floor, his bones twisting, his flesh absorbed into the walls. And the house, it sighed again, satisfied. The next visitors. By morning, the house stood silent. The storm had passed, the door wide open. A car pulled up. A new group of travelers stepped out. "Looks abandoned," one of them muttered. The door creaked wider, and the house whispered, "Come inside." The end, or just another beginning.